My husband rides a bicycle an awful lot, and all that bike riding can do a number on the seat of your pants. As you can see here, there is a giant tear right in the seat of the pants. And I am going to teach you in this tutorial how to fix a tear like this with some really simple hand sewing skills. So let's go. Before I jump in, I just want to mention that I am using Jessica Marquez's book, Make and Mend, as inspiration for this repair job. You don't need this book to fix your pants, but if you're like repairing things, I would definitely check this out, and I will put a link to it in the description box below this video. So let me walk you through the materials to fix a big tear like this. You are going to want a patch of fabric to use to fix the hole, and I don't have anything exactly like this, so this is the closest material that I have. It'll be a little bit visible, but that's fine. These pants can be kind of, yard work pants or whatever. But if you wanted to get a more invisible repair job, you could try to find a really similar fabric. And like I said, we're going to do this with some really simple hand sewing. So you're going to need a needle and thread that blends in with your fabric. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to iron this tear area. And I have this cool little sleeve board, but you don't need that. You can just iron this on your ironing board on the thinner side. And I just want to get this area as flat as possible so that I can see what is going on here with this tear. So I'm just going to take a minute and get all this fabric laying as flat as I can. Okay, now that it's looking a little more ironed, I'm going to trim away any loose threads. I have this really small piece of the fabric that just sort of ripped off on its own. So I'm also going to trim that away because it's not really going to help in the repair process. And then I'm also going to trim away some of these longer threads that are just hanging off because they're not going to add anything to the repair job. Okay, I finished sort of tidying up the tear. So in the next step, I'm going to take this patch and I am going to put it to the back of the tear. So now the patch is inside the pants. And I want to get it so that this fabric has like multiple colors. I'm trying to get this sort of shade closer to the tear, but it doesn't really matter. Like I said, these pants are not going to be going out for fancy dinner dates. Probably just be worn around the yard, things like that. Okay, so the patch definitely needs to be large enough to cover the area of the hole. And once it's there, you want to kind of get the fabric, the tear, sort of imagine that the tear is going to be gone soon. And you can kind of see what part of the fabric is going to be showing. Okay. And then I'm going to do some really big basting stitches to keep the patch generally in place in the back of the pants. So I'm going to take my matching thread and I am going to thread my needle. Hopefully it doesn't take me too many tries. All right, I got it. Okay. And I want a double strand of thread that's not too long, but not too short. So a double strand, that just means that I put the thread through, I folded it over, so there are two strands coming out and coming together, and then I'm going to tie these into a little knot at the end and do a little doubling there. Okay, so now that I have some thread on my needle, I am going to go to the inside of the pants and find that patch. Make sure it's in the right place. And then I'm just going to do some really big stitches with this thread to kind of hold the patch in place. And if you wanted, you could pin the patch in place first. That's probably a good idea, to pin it with some straight pins. So why don't I take a minute? I'm just going to throw a couple of straight pins in here around the tear area, just like this. So this is where I lost a little fabric, so a little bit of my patch will show through, and that's okay. But I can kind of pin some of this other fabric onto the patch. Okay, I went ahead and pinned the patch in place. It doesn't have to be perfect in terms of how flat the fabric is laying at this point. We just want to get a rough sense of the old fabric pinned to the new fabric. And now I'm going to go ahead and keep sewing the patch with these really long basting stitches. So they're long and loose. Well, not necessarily loose, but they are long. And they're going to come out at the end when we're all done, but they're going to just help hold these two layers together. So I'm not sewing my pants closed, obviously, or my husband's pants closed. I am just sewing the torn area onto the new patch, and I'm leaving some room. I don't want to get too close to the torn area because I'm going to be working with this, folding it, and we need some space there. So I'm going to finish basting and I'll be right back. Okay, I have basted around the tear and I still have my pins in place. And what I'm going to do next is I am going to start folding over this raw torn edge just enough to get all of those loose threads tucked away. So I'm going to do a little fold. And then I'm going to take my needle and thread and I am going to sew that little folded area down in place. So I'm going to actually take my needle and thread to the inside of the pants, and then I'm going to come out right on this little folded edge. Now, depending on how small you want to make your stitches, if you're trying to make this a barely noticeable type tear, you'll want to use little stitches, but like I said, for this pair of pants, that is not going to happen. It's going to be noticeable, and that's okay. So I'm just going to push my needle through near that edge and then just do a small stitch back into the patch area. Okay, I'm going to show you another stitch with a little bit of a close-up. So I'm just coming from the back through the pants and the patch, and then back down over the folded edge, back into the patch. And I'm doing my stitches kind of small. I'm going to keep going around. I'm going to fold the raw edge of the pants fabric over, and I'm going to keep hand stitching it in place. And I'm going to take pins out as I go, as they get in my way. So it's going to take a little minute. I just thought I'd show you if you have a little, a little corner where you got to kind of turn the corner on your tear. All you need to do is just, so I've got one edge folded over here and then just fold over the other edge. So you have a little bit of a bulkier spot, but you have all of the raw edges are still tucked in there. And then you just want to sew down that little corner and then just keep working like you were before. And it might take a couple tries to get your needle to come out where you want it. There we go. Okay, I finished sewing all the way around the tear and kind of folding in the fabric so there's no visible raw edges. I did get a couple of little pleats, and I think that's partly because this fabric got stretched out, and partly because I am not perfect. So if you find that you get a couple little pleats and that bothers you, you could always kind of take out stitches and see if you can get it to lay more flat. But if you're okay with it, then you're done with this first step here. And I'm just going to flip to the inside, and I'm going to create a little knot and trim these, trim the rest of this thread off. So I'm just going under a stitch on the inside and making a loop, and then traveling into the loop. My knot is a little messy, but that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and trim. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim away some of this extra fabric from the patch, but I want to leave enough to fold over the raw edge of the patch and sew it in place as well. So I'm going to go ahead and cut about a 1/2 inch away from my stitches, which you can see better in certain areas. Let me just get my scissors, and I'll start here. Obviously, I'm only cutting through the patch. I am not cutting through the pants. And I'm just going to carefully work my way around and trim this patch. Now that I have trimmed away some of the extra fabric off the patch, I am going to go around and I'm going to fold the raw edge of the patch over and just do a quick little stitch to keep these raw edges from fraying over time and with washes. So I'm going to just get my needle and thread and just sew a little whip stitch all the way around. Okay, I finished hand sewing the edge of the patch in place. And the next thing I'm going to do, and the last thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to sew it onto some of the seams. And I'll probably throw a couple little stitches here and there just to hold the patch in place. If you have interfacing, you could absolutely put some interfacing over this patch, and like a nice round piece of interfacing that covers your whole patch, and you could iron it in place, and then the whole patch will be a little less noticeable through your pants, through the inside of your pants, or whatever, clothing you're repairing. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and sew some of the loose spots of the patch onto some of the internal seam allowance areas of the pants, and then I'll probably do just a couple really small stitches through the pants to hold it down in a couple more spots. Okay, I threw a couple little stitches in there, and they're barely noticeable, and I threw a couple little stitches in here, also barely noticeable. And now it's time for the grand reveal. The hole is fixed. The pants are ready for use. Like I said, if you want a more subtle repair, just find a matching fabric. But otherwise, these are going to be good to go for some yard work, around the house type stuff. And if you're looking for more repair projects, I am linking to a playlist of a bunch of repair videos right underneath this video.